Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chowda with Ignition Time and welcome to my channel, folks. I have some interesting new information for you that was just released by the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. I'll break down this information for you and I'll tell you exactly what it means for your future. Welcome to my channel, everybody. Let's show you this article on your screen that was published by Bloomberg today. The headline of the article reads, CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office, sees a stronger US recovery after the stimulus moves in 2020. Now, folks, what is interesting here is this could actually make it harder. It could make it harder to pass the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan for President Biden because the CBO is expecting that the economy is essentially going to bounce back. And there's some very interesting numbers here, although it is still an uneven recovery. The bottom line is this: the US economy is recovering much faster than expected. The US economy is proving to be much more resilient than anybody expected because by and large, according to the CBO, according to the Congressional Budget Office, the economy is well on its way back. Folks, don't blame the messenger. I'm simply reporting what's been reported by the Congressional Budget Office. I'll break it down for you and then I'll help you understand exactly what it means for you. So folks, the CBO estimates that GDP, gross domestic product, will actually increase by 1.7% annually from 2020 all the way through 2024. In other words, we're going to start to grow again. Now folks, this is 0.7% higher than the previous expectation, than the previous analysis estimate that was put out in July of this year. Keep in mind that was months before we heard about the vaccines towards the end of the year, and now that the vaccines are starting to get distributed, there is a surge in expectations, if you will. And if you've been following the stock market, you can see that the stock market is anticipating that the economy will continue to get better this year and next year. In fact, folks, this strong recovery could bolster the position of the Republicans. If you, just to get you caught up with what's going on, there's Brian Deese, the director of the White House Economic Council. He's been meeting with all these Republican senators and he's been meeting with all these Democratic senators. And the consensus between the Republican senators and the Democratic senators seems to be, hey, not everyone needs help. Let's make the stimulus more targeted. Let's provide it to lower income people. This could bolster the case for the Republicans because the Republicans are like, hey man, the economy is recovering much faster than expected. And folks, what's going on today is that President Biden is going to meet with the 10 Republican senators who proposed a $618 billion plan. I want to be as clear as I can. I don't think that plan's going to go anywhere because President Biden will be like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. But what is interesting is that President Biden is meeting with the Republicans before he's actually met with Democrats about this plan. So there's a very interesting political calculation going on over here right now. And folks, speaking of interesting political calculation, there's Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders basically told us over the weekend that the Democrats have enough votes to pass the $1.9 trillion stimulus package through the process of reconciliation. So folks, let's get back to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. The Congressional Budget Office said that its upgrade came, I quote, in large part because the downturn was not as severe as expected and because the final stage of the recovery took place sooner and stronger than expected. Super interesting that they're saying that things are looking much better now. In addition, this is what they said: stimulus that was approved in December, we're talking about the $900 billion package, played a part in improving the economic outlook. This is the flip side that Democrats are actually going to seize on. So this agency, the Congressional Budget Office, actually lowered its long-term forecast over the next 4 years. So Democrats will say, hey, there's a downgrade in the long-term CBO forecast, which is evidence that the economy still needs help. So keep in mind, the CBO, the agency, expects a 1.7% annual growth between 2025 and 2030. I'm talking 2025 to 2030 now, not the next 4 or 5 years. And this is actually down from 2.1% that was forecast in the July report. So folks, the interesting thing about numbers and economics is even though numbers tend to be fairly objective, you'll see both sides saying, well, this number looks really good right now, so we don't need stimulus now. And then the other side will say, no. The long-term number looks really bad, so therefore we need stimulus right now. But the interesting thing and what could potentially be a ray of hope, if you will, for us is that the economy is indeed, by and large, recovering better than expected. Now, I want to be clear. I know that individuals in travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality have been impacted, but this has always been an uneven recovery. This is a K-shaped recovery where individuals at the top of the K are back to normal doing better than ever before, rising home prices, a skyrocketing stock market, whereas individuals at the bottom of the case simply have seen their life savings wiped out and are dependent on stimulus checks and unemployment. And folks, what's even more interesting is that the Federal Reserve, their measure of inflation will pick up gradually over the next few years and rise above 2% in 2023. In other words, the Federal Reserve thinks that inflation will start to pick up in 2023, 2024, and that's when we could start to see an increase in interest rates, which is, by the way, usually the point where the stock market tends to come down. So all signs are emerging that we could continue to see a massive rally in the stock market because of low interest rates and because of a very high liquidity environment that we are in the middle of right now. And folks, in what is potentially the biggest sign that we are a healthy economy is that the Federal Reserve does not expect major inflation. They expect inflation to be right around 2.1% from 2024 to 2021, which means we could start to see interest rates go back up in 2024, but not by a whole lot. And so we could be in for what is potentially a Goldilocks period for the economy heading into the next few years. And so my advice to all our viewers and subscribers would be, as best as you can, save money, find ways to invest it intelligently so that we can all try and recover together. And folks, if you thought all this was interesting, the CBO estimate does not take into account the $1.9 trillion stimulus proposal, the American Rescue Plan from President Biden. Imagine having that added to the mix. That'll actually result in the economy improving even further. However, the CBO did say, and I quote, that the projections are, I quote, subject to an unusually high degree of uncertainty stemming from the course of the pandemic, the effectiveness of monetary and fiscal policies, the response of global financial markets to substantial increases in public deficits and debt. In short, there is still some uncertainty ahead, although the overall projection seems to be highly optimistic, more optimistic than we had thought before. And so, folks, now let's take a look at a summary of the CBO report from another source, from CNBC, so you can essentially get their take on this as well. Let's roll the segment and hear what CNBC had to say.
CBO just releasing its annual budget and economic outlook just moments ago. Our Elon Mui has that for us. Elon, over to you.
Well, Deirdre, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office is now projecting that the economy will grow 3.7% this year and average 2.6% over the next 5 years, even without additional fiscal support from Washington. The CBO is also forecasting the unemployment rate would fall to 5.3% this year and that the size of the labor force would return to its pre-pandemic levels by 2022. However, the number of people employed will not return to its previous level until 2024. The CBO estimates that inflation will rise to 2% after 2023 and that the Fed will gradually start to hike interest rates after mid-2024. Now, these economic projections are actually better than what the CBO had forecast last summer. And the CBO says that's because the downturn was not as severe as expected. The first phase of the recovery was sooner and stronger than expected, and because of the last COVID relief package that passed at the end of last year. So, Deirdre, overall, a rosier outlook for the economy over the next 5 years from the CBO.
That's it, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of the CBO's estimates and whether you think the CBO's estimates can actually decrease the chances of the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan, because I can assure you that the Republicans are indeed going to seize on this. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. This right here is a little bit of information about me. Please click like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. I would really, really appreciate that. Also, please share this video with 2 friends or family members. That would be awesome. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to talking to you soon. Bye.